What's up guys, TechNick here, and today once again we're going to be doing something a little different, a little creative. Instead of doing one phone or two phones, we're going to be reviewing three phones. Well, it's going to be more of an unboxing and impressions kind of video. I'm not going to go too in depth, but I am going to give you some serious solid advice if you are looking for a phone at this price range, since the POCO M4 5G, POCO M5 and POCO M5s, which have all released within a month of each other, the M4 5G being the oldest, released pretty much a month ago, the others just about a week or two ago. They're all very similarly priced, they all have very similar specifications, but there are some key differences over here which I really want to get into, and if you are interested in these devices, I think that you're going to want to hear out what I have to say during this review. Now, of course, all of the devices do come bundled with a bunch of goodies in the box. They all come with silicone cases. They all come with charging bricks. The POCO M4 5G and POCO M5 both come with 22.5 watts charging adapters, whereas the POCO M5s comes with a 33 watts charging adapter. The POCO 5s can charge at 33 watts and these two are limited to 18 watts. So slow charging over there, a little bit more on that a tad bit later. Of course, they also come with their cables bundled in the box as well. Very budget, kind of premium budget phone, since they come with all the goodies that you would expect in the box, but you wouldn't really expect it at such a great price. This is TechNick and this is my unboxing and full impressions video on the POCO M4 5G, POCO M5 and POCO 5s. Now, as I mentioned, all the prices of these devices are extremely similar. When it comes to design and colorways, we do have the M4 5G coming in black, blue, or yellow. The M5 comes in black, green, or yellow, and they look identical, though the M5 has a leathery-like design at the back. And the M5s comes in white, gray, or blue. But the weird thing about the M5s is the fact that it looks identical to last year's Mi 11 series. I'm not sure what they're going for with it. It does, however, look a lot more premium than the M4 5G and the M5. They all share the same massive 5000 mAh battery cells. There's 18 watt charging on the POCO M4 5G and POCO M5, while the POCO M5s is treated to faster 33 watts charging. The POCO M4 5G comes with a MediaTek Dimensity 700 CPU run on 7nm process node technology. The M5, a Helio G99 CPU run on 6nm process node technology, and the M5s, a pretty old and very inefficient 12nm run Helio G95 CPU. Now, the POCO M4 5G and the POCO M5, even though they have different chipsets, they do sport the exact same integrated GPU, that being the Mali G57 MC2 GPU. The POCO M5s, this guy over here, its integrated GPU is a Mali G76 MC4. They're all kitted with LPDDR4X RAM and UFS 2.2 storage. Where the differences come in, however, is the fact that the POCO M4 5G in fact has 5G, while the other two are capped at 4G networks. Though they all have Wi-Fi and they all have NFC, the weird thing is that the POCO M4 5G has Bluetooth 5.1. The POCO M5s has Bluetooth 5.0, and the cheapest of the lot here, the POCO M5, has the best Bluetooth technology, that being Bluetooth 5.3. All devices are protected by Gorilla Glass 3 on the front. They all have, unfortunately, plastic backs and plastic frames. However, they do have a tad bit of protection when it comes to dust as well as splash resistance. The POCO M4 5G comes in at 8.9mm thick, the same as the POCO M5, and the POCO M5s is the thinnest and the lightest at 8.29mm thick and 178.8 grams in weight. Now, when it comes to cameras, you'll probably notice that they do have a few differences on the back of their camera modules. In terms of ultra-wide, the M4 5G and the M5 both lack ultra-wide sensors, and while the M5s does house one, it's only 8 megapixels with a field of view of 118 degrees. They of course all have main cameras, though the M4 5G has a pretty terrible camera at just 13 megapixels. The M5 steps it up at 50 megapixels, and the M5s has arguably the best camera in terms of megapixel count at 64 megapixels. However, they do all share the exact same depth camera over here, that being a 2 megapixel aperture of f2.4 depth camera. And while the M5 and M5s both share the exact same 2 megapixel macro camera, once again, the M4 5G lacks a macro camera of any kind. Of course, the M5s is the only one with an ultra-wide sensor over here. It does an okay job. 64 main, 50 main, and 13 main on all devices look okay. Bin down on the two on the right look even better. We do have 2x digital zoom on all of them, which look okay. 5x, not the best. 10x is the max on all of them. The M5s arguably looks the best over here. Taking a picture of me with the mains looks decent, and with the portrait effect using the depth sensor, it looks great on all of them. Of course, using the macro on the two devices on the right definitely make a difference that lacks on the M4 5G. And when it comes to video, we do have 1080p 30 FPS on all of them, though it caps at that for the M4 5G and the M5. The M5s can do 1080p 60 FPS video, which looks a little bit more stable. It also has 4K 30 FPS, which lacks on the other two, so it's only available on the M5s. And of course, we can also record on the ultra-wide, though it is capped at 1080p 30 FPS. The other two devices, that being the M4 5G and the M5, lack any form of ultra-wide video. So when it comes to cameras, of course, it's a bit of a toss-up between all of them. I do think that the M5s and the M5 do have the better main sensors. Actually, both of them have better cameras than the M4 5G, and the M4 5G has a pretty bad main sensor, though it still kind of holds its own quite well. It does lack any form of ultra-wide and macro sensor for that matter, though it does have a depth to match that of the M5. The M5s still takes the crown here with the best main. It has the best ultra-wide, since it's the only one with ultra-wide. It also packs in a macro and a depth sensor, and it has 4K video recording and of course ultra-wide recording too. So when it comes to the camera department, definitely the 5S. Now on the right side of all devices, they all have a power button which is mashed up with a fingerprint sensor. Above that, non-split volume rockers, and on the left of all three devices, we do have dual SIM trays. Of course, the M4 5G, the only one that supports dual 5G, the others have dual 4G, but all of them do have access to expandable storage up to 1 terabyte. At the bottom of the devices, they all have USB 2.0 Type-C ports, and they all have speakers at the bottom, though the M5s is the only one with a secondary speaker at the top, the only one with dual speakers. The other ones are limited to single. They all have 3.5mm jacks, so the M5s has one at the bottom, and of course they all have IR blasters as well. Now when it comes to the selfie cameras, they are pretty similar, though they do have different styles. We have water drop notches on the M4 5G and M5, while we have a hole punch notch on the M5s. The M5s also has the best selfie camera here in terms of megapixel count at 13 megapixels, while the M4 5G and M5 have the same 5 megapixel selfie cameras. Selfies actually look more than decent on all of them, the most natural on the M5s thanks to that high megapixel count, and when it comes to portrait mode, it looks pretty decent with almost perfect edge detection on all three devices. But what about video? Do bear in mind that they are all capped at 1080p 30 FPS when it comes to selfie video recording. What's up guys, this is TechNick recording a 1080p 30 FPS selfie video on the brand new POCO M4 5G, POCO M5, and POCO M5s. Let me know what you guys think of the video, as well as the audio quality on this audio, this audio, and this audio. So when it comes to selfies, they actually all do a decent job, and while the M5s does have a higher megapixel count when it comes to the selfie camera, it actually looks a bit more washed out at times when compared to the other two. I think the other two are a little bit more saturated, sometimes a little too oversaturated, but the M5s does still look the most natural, though sometimes I do look a little bit ghost-like. Unfortunately, they are all capped at 1080p 30 FPS when it comes to selfie video recording. Now when it comes to powering on all devices, you'll notice that the M5s is the only device that has an always on display. The other two lack this because they have IPS LCD panels, while the M5s has an AMOLED display over here. They all have physical side-mounted fingerprint sensors that work relatively well. I'd say the M5s is a tad slower than the other two, and we do have double tap to face unlock on all three devices over here. They're not the quickest, and they do utilize the selfie camera, so they're not very secure, though they still do the job as intended. The POCO M4 5G and M5 have the exact same same 6.58-inch IPS LCD display. While the POCO M5s does have a smaller 6.43-inch display, it is indeed AMOLED, which means that colors are gonna pop pretty vibrantly all the time. And because the M5s is AMOLED, it can reach a higher peak brightness in terms of nits, which goes all the way up to 1100, as opposed to the 500 nits that we see on the M4 5G and M5. Where the M5s really does drop the ball, however, is in terms of refresh rate. The M4 5G and M5 both sport 90Hz refresh rates, while the M5s is capped at 60Hz. It's 2022. I know it's a mid-range phone. I know that they're all relatively the same price, but the M5s should have at least a 90Hz refresh rate, and the two on the left have 240Hz touch sampling rates. Moving on to software, we are kitted with MIUI 13 on all of them, skinned over Android 12. They all look identical. They all come luted in with full Google services support, with Google Discover on the left-hand side, as well as Google Assistant from the bottom left corner when you pull in. But what about those speakers? Since we have dual stereo speakers on the M5s, how does it compare to the two on the left? They all come with up to 6 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM, and you can further it by an additional 2 gigs of RAM thanks to memory extension. Now, as mentioned earlier, the M4 5G has a Dimensity 700 CPU, the M5 has a Helio G99 CPU, and the M5s has a Helio G95 CPU. In terms of GPU, the two on the left do have a higher frequency in terms of GPU speed, but the M5s does pack in 4 GPU cores as opposed to the 2 cores on the M4 5G and the M5. Another thing that the M4 5G has up its sleeve is performance mode, whereas the M5 and M5s both lack this within the software. And getting to the AnTuTu results over here, weirdly enough, the M4 5G got the lowest score of 344,937 points. Next up was the M5s of 367,340 points, and the crown king here is no doubt the POCO M5 with that Helio G99, the brand new chipset, with a score of 370,599 points. So when it comes to performance, I guess it's safe to say that yes, the M5s does have an older chipset compared to the others, and yes, it does have a less efficient chipset, that being because it's running at 12 nanometer process node technology, but it actually holds its own quite well considering it has a 4-core GPU, and it gets pretty similar points in AnTuTu when compared to the M5 with a much newer, literally released this year, Helio G99 chipset, though that just has 2 GPU cores. But scrap performance for now. Let's end this with a bit of a pros and cons. So the M4 5G has 2 major points going for it, that being 5G and a 90Hz refresh rate panel. Of course, one up that is the cameras on the regular M5 over here, since it has a better main camera, 50 megapixels as opposed to the 13 on the M4 5G, and it has the same depth sensor, but it also adds in a macro camera, which is great. They both have the same size battery, and they both have the same fast charging. They both have the same screen, though that's a bit of a downfall for these two since they both IPS LCD panels, though they both have high refresh rate panels, which is something that is lacking on the M5s since this hits only 60 Hz all the time, though it does have a major thing going for it, and that is a very bright 1100 nit peak brightness 6.43-inch AMOLED display, though the 60 Hz is a bit of a bummer, and there is once again no 5G on this guy, just like we saw no 5G on the regular M5. The only one here with 5G is the M4 5G, so if you need 5G, these two are not for you, but if you don't really mind not having 5G, then the M5s is probably the most premium over here. It's in the middle in terms of pricing. It does everything that you would want it to do. It has the best camera system over here with a 64 megapixel main and adds in an ultra wide camera as opposed to the regular M5 over here. It has the exact same depth and macro sensor, and not to mention it has faster charging and a better selfie camera. So this is definitely the best buy, the M5s, but it could have been the absolute best buy in terms of this price point in 2022. This could have been the best mid-range smartphone ever at this price point if they just added in a high refresh rate and 5G to the M5s. It would have been the perfect phone. I probably would have used it myself. So if they just took the energy and resources that they put into all three of these just into one great mid-range phone. I really think a lot of people would have benefited from it. But at the end of the day, all of these phones are very well priced, and you're gonna be hard pressed to find any other phone out there at this price point with the features, specs, cameras that these phones have, not to mention their battery is just absolutely massive at 5,000 milliamps. I really do value what you guys think, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below of which one you think is the best out of these three, and if you have or plan on purchasing one going forward. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this unboxing and this trio of phones impressions and review. This is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.